Yeah, let's get it! Born from the spark under red, white, and blue lights. Forge my own path, climbing these brand new heights. This ain't a debate, we setting the new standard. The voice of the free, a vision that's expanded. True Grimaldi Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us. This Saturday, we have a very special guest, Mr. Ramon Perez. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is. Thank you so much for coming on this Saturday.
Drew, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you are doing some amazing work. Your background, for what I saw, was in, AI, and all that kind of stuff. So how did you make that branch from, AI background into, designing voting systems through blockchains?
Yeah, so I was a military officer for many years, and when I left active duty, I guess this was kind of before we really called it AI, I suppose. Back then, it was mostly just taking what a lot of things we had done in the military and applying them to just big data, sifting through huge data sets to try to find interesting patterns. But then I got introduced, because I've been working in technology now for the last dozen or so years. I got introduced to the CEO of Votes, who builds the mobile voting software, and they were building it for military voters overseas to cast an absentee ballot from their phone. So essentially, if you're at if you're a submarine under the water for 6 months at a time, it's hard to get mail, right? Or if you're in the Horn of Africa in a special forces unit, you don't get good postal service delivery. So and because I had been deployed during more than one election, I immediately understood that problem. And I said, man, if you guys are able to build software specifically for military voters to vote by phone, you have to go through all the credentials you would expect. You'd have to be able to verify that they're U.S. citizens. You have to be able to verify that they're residents of their state. You got to do a photo ID that matches their face, so you're matching that's the real person who's actually controls the phone. That nobody took grandma's phone and tried to vote on her behalf, that kind of a thing. And then do all of that in order to, with the encryption that's involved and the device level authentication to even get to the point where you can put it onto a blockchain and then know that the vote that's cast is the vote that's counted at the end that gets tallied. If you can do all of that, I said, well, man, you've got something really special here. Why would we wait every couple of years to let people have a say in their government? Why don't we just let people have a say all the time? We could essentially create the Netflix of government. We could let people engage whenever they want, wherever they want from their couch. And I thought, okay, that's what we ought to be building. And so we partnered with Votes. They're spelled VOATZ, and we partnered with them in 2021. Started building Digital Democracy Project, which is a nonprofit organization where we say we'll use the technology, but for a different purpose. We'll let people weigh in on bills that are being debated in Congress and in their state house, so that people can actually tell their legislators how they want them to vote before their legislators vote on the same bill in the Capitol, so that the voters can have a say in the process and not feel like we're just sort of sitting on the sidelines, kind of just watching the show. We can actually be involved in saying, this is what we think we want for our communities, and letting our legislators have some verified input from people in their district that they know are citizens and they know they actually live there and that they're registered to vote. And
wouldn't you say that that's one of the downsides of polls, is that if you're doing a poll, you just ask a sample size, but they could be anybody. They might not even be a citizen. They might not even be able to vote. They just tell you their opinion,
Right. That's part of the challenge. The other issue with polls is they're very expensive. So a lot of, a legislator's not going to do that on a regular basis, because it could be 40, 50 grand for a congressman to get a poll of his own district. So they're only going to do that when they're in a competitive election. And realistically, Drew, 94% of U.S. House districts are not even competitive. So they don't bother asking their districts anymore. As long as they can get as long as they keep their primary voters happy, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, as long as they keep that small sliver of people who will vote in a primary, about 8 to 10%, they keep them happy, they keep their jobs. They don't really need to spend 40 grand or whatever to poll their district, so they're not going to.
Right. So let me ask you this. So you're composing these scorecards of these politicians based on how people are voting and how likely, they are to your values. What is like, do the politicians have anything to say about this? Do they like it? Do they not like it? Like, how does that go?
I will say I have been thrown out of the offices of both Democrats and Republicans alike. There are some, we got some early support from like a bipartisan group of like a senior Republican out of a rural district in Florida, Ocala area, and a junior Democrat out of Orlando. So very red district, very blue district, but they both saw the value in it and said, well, geez, it just helps me be a better legislator.
Right.
I'm not worried about, hearing from, if you're in a really red district, you're not worried about like, what are they going to, you're mostly interested in the things that split the party.
Right.
The things where even the Republicans are fighting on one issue, or even the Democrats are fighting on one issue. So they saw the value in it, and they worked together to put together a bipartisan appropriation, put it into the state legislation, pushed it through the whole budget process, and got it passed. And then Ron DeSantis vetoed it. So,
oh no. No.
So,
why did he veto it? Like, what was his reasoning for that? I'm just curious.
It's hard to say. I think, like you were saying, some legislators, you see a score that says, because that's what we're doing. We're saying, well, your district said they wanted you to do X, and you did Y. And how often did you match your district? And, there are Republicans who are doing well in those scorecards, and there are Republicans who are doing poorly, and there are Democrats who do well, and there are Democrats who do poorly. It just depends on their district, and it depends on how they vote, with their district. Right. And so, my suspicion is there were Republicans who had the ear of the governor who said, we want you to kill this because it makes me look bad, that kind of a thing.
Right.
So
yeah, that makes sense. They have their interest too, unfortunately. But, you got to so let me ask you this. Where does the blockchain come in? Because last week I had a guy on who was talking about his voting software, and I asked him about the security end of it, and he just said, well, I'm not too worried about the security end of it, because if there's hacked or anything, we can just run it again. And I thought to myself, well, that's kind of different. I would rather it be secure, because if you're constantly redoing these votes, people are not going to have faith in it. They might be like, oh,
confidence.
This is a scam, or, this is cheating, or, the same type of arguments you get in like 2020,
Right, exactly. Because if you could just keep rerunning the election until you get the results that you want, that doesn't really look great.
Right.
So blockchain is a very powerful tool, and I think when we take away the crypto element, there's no cryptocurrency involved with this. But basically, blockchain is a distributed ledger. It's just a way of recording transactions where no one organization has the keys to that. So if you think about your bank, and you buy and sell things, and it gets recorded against your account, you trust the bank to keep track of how much money is in your account, and that's what you pay bank fees for, right? Blockchain is the basic concept. The reason that Bitcoin exists is we had the banks collapse in 2008 and 2009. We had this big financial crisis,
right?
And that's
years
when blockchain
ago,
came about.
Went down.
Yeah. And blockchain came about in that era. How could you have transactions without banks in the middle? So you've got multiple copies of a ledger that are recorded, and anybody can see it and download it and record it in their computers all over the world. And then people are paid in cryptocurrency for adding new transactions and verifying them on the ledger.
Right.
So that's how Bitcoin comes about. But they all have to agree with each other that it's the same transaction, otherwise the transaction doesn't get added. So the reason that works is because it's decentralized. It's kind of a zero trust system. No one developer with the high level super admin access can get into a database and make changes. No organization that may have an incentive to beat can have access to the results. And so nobody owns the vote tally, because it's decentralized, and in the way that votes is designed, the Republicans and Democrats, some independent auditors, we've talked to them about being an independent verifier on the blockchain ourselves as a nonprofit independent organization. So that way you've got more eyeballs, verifying votes going on to the blockchain. But the key thing with voting that makes it so unique is that you have to know who the person is. You have to trust that they are a U.S. citizen, that you can verify their face matches their photo ID, But then you have to also give them a secret ballot, because you want to make certain that nobody could either bribe them or coerce them or track them or say, oh, I didn't like the way you voted, come to their house, break their knees, whatever.
Right.
So they have to, we have to protect the secret ballot. That's what makes voting so unique. And I think
so
what Votes has done is very...
Because you have things like Ethereum, for example, and I know there's different things out there. Like there was one called like Propy, I believe it was, where they wanted to record all of the real estate for like real estate transactions and put it on that ledger type thing. So I think it's an awesome idea to use that same thing for voting if you can actually keep it secure. You know what I mean? I think that's the
key thing that makes voting. Yeah, voting is so unique as a problem because, like, if you think about real estate, currently your county might keep a register of real estate transactions that's public. So everybody, that's how Zillow, they just go and they pull it and they figure out, who's bought something, who's sold something. With voting, you want the identity to be verifiably true, but you want to protect the secrecy of how they voted. That's what makes it a bit of a challenge. And I think Votes has done that in a very clever way using what's called end-to-end verifiability, which is, it uses this concept called homomorphic encryption, where you can encrypt a record but still perform mathematical operations against the encrypted record. This is a unique development in the last 10 years or so of cryptography, but it means that if you add votes to the blockchain, this one says voted yes, this one voted no, this one voted yes, this one voted no. You can add up all the yeses and add up all the nos without decrypting them. That's a key advantage. And so what it allows us to do is, for our purposes, we can get a continuous update of how did people vote on a given bill. Let's say, the One Big Beautiful Bill was a big example, or there was a recent one with the war in Iran. There's a war powers resolution that the Senate is considering right now. And how do we give people a verifiable way to say this is what the voters in Florida or Michigan or whatever state believe on the war powers resolution on Iran, without identifying that Drew voted yes and I voted no, or whatever the case. And that's the key advantage that I think mobile voting provides now. So we continuously can provide those updates on maps on our website. And if you go to digitaldemocracyproject.org, you can see a breakdown throughout the United States as people are voting, whether they're state or their U.S. House district, or in the states where we're doing state-level legislation, you can go down to the state House and state Senate district to see how people are voting on state-level bills. Right.
Oh, I think that's awesome. So let me ask you this. I saw this MIT article where they talked about votes, I believe it was, and they said that the biggest liability in the whole system is like the phone, is what their argument was. But I mean, that you can get some stuff on the phone that would, change what they're seeing, for example. It's kind of a weird one-off type thing. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Votes asked that MIT team to come and do basically a red team like hacking to try to find vulnerabilities. That was a 2020 hackathon type of thing. So they've implemented a lot of changes as a result of that. And you're absolutely right. I think that they were never able to hack the blockchain itself and try to manipulate the tallies. The way you do it is, again, you convince grandma to click on some phishing link, right? You send an email and she gives up her passwords, and then somebody manipulates the phone itself. That's how people will try to attack this type of a system. And the way you then what Votes has implemented since then is a lot more on the Face ID, Touch ID, two-factor authentication, so that you're continuously being checked as you're going through the process to make sure you're still the same person that you claim to be, and that they're constantly pushing updates to the app to make certain that only the most current app is allowed to cast a vote onto the blockchain. So if you have an older version of the app, that's what the MIT team also was able to do. They found old versions of the app that were no longer in the App Store, and they found holes in the older apps. So if you were somebody who had an older version of the app on your phone, and you also had been subjected to a phishing attack and clicked a malicious link or something, you could get manipulated that way. So I think they've done a fair bit to try to take the feedback from that report and then just continuously do audits as you go. It's like a moving target. You're always going to be fighting. Well, now we've got a lot of AI generated cyber attacks. You're always going to be trying to stay ahead.
Yep.
Absolutely.
It's like
that continuous process of improvement is really important in order to make this kind of a system viable.
I agree. Now, let me ask you this, because, you got some businesses and corporations out there that have thousands of IT staff to keep something, managed, running. Big companies, have IT teams just to keep their websites, constantly updating, doing things, making sure that there's no vulnerabilities, hacks, or anything. What type of personnel would you think it would take, or what type of human, power would it take, resources would it take to keep something like this secure?
Yeah, I think actually this really should be like Digital Democracy Project, what we're doing on legislation. This really should be run by government, right? That was our thinking when we went to the state of Florida and said, hey, we've kind of built a prototype here, but we really think you should take this over and run this for the state. And provide this as a service to voters, because you're right. Like you want the level of security that a government will provide, and so for votes for mobile voting and all the states that basically hire votes as a tool, they put them through the state ramp certification process, and they require verification against their own standards. So the states will actually provide their IT teams to attempt to break into it or to run audits or any kind of flags or whatever. The way the states have kind of managed the risk right now is that they've limited it to military voters overseas and also to certain voters with who may have trouble getting to the polls, or maybe blind voters who have trouble with touch screens at a polling location. They'll give them the chance to vote by phone. So what the states are doing is they're kind of limiting who has access as a way to kind of limit the risk threshold.
Gotcha.
With Digital Democracy Project, because we're really letting people have an advisory vote to tell their legislators how they want them to vote. It's not a binding election because we're not the state supervisor of elections. So inherently it's less risky in the sense that we're not determining the outcome of an election where it might shift, some senator, some governor, whatever. So it lowers a bit of the threshold of risk for us, but we still want to use the same high quality process because we want legislators to have confidence that these are real people, that they're actually in their district, and that nobody's trying to put their thumb on the scale to try to convince them to vote one way or the other.
Right.
Because that's the other reason why we established ourselves as a nonprofit, and we try to balance our board of directors with Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, forward party members, like independents, whatever, so that we've got that our process can be unimpeachable and people can have confidence that we don't have a dog in the fight. We're not making money off of this. Right. We're providing it as a public service. And ultimately, we do believe that this public service should be run by governments at some point.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I think, too, with like the big, beautiful bill and, like the Save America Act, they're trying to bring that under, kind of one umbrella. But I did want to say for your military service, thank you for your service. And
you're very kind.
And I always like to ask, what was, because I don't have any military experience, so I really appreciate everything you guys do. But what was one of the biggest, things that you learned, personally in the military? I'm just curious, one of the life lessons that you still take with you, or, something like that.
Yeah, I think that for me, I still think about the call to service in everything that we do every single day. Like, what are we trying to provide to our fellow citizens, to humanity as overall? So even though we're not wearing the uniform anymore, that sense of being driven by purpose, of having a sense of integrity in what you do and a sense of honor in your purpose, I think that drives me every single day. And I got a lot of that from my time in the military.
That's awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for your service. So right now, you said that this is in 7 states, and Florida kind of shut the whole thing down. But what do you think the biggest hurdle? What do you think the biggest hurdle is going to be to get this into mass adoption?
Honestly, it's just getting the word out, and that's why I appreciate independent media like you guys, because I think it's very clear that with all the corporate media consolidation, it's tough to get ideas like this through through the corporate media channels. I think a lot of it is going to be independent media. And I feel like we've gotten a lot of people have heard about us through shows like yours. So I'm very excited about that. I mean, I think it's been great to have access to that kind of like channel of information that previously wouldn't have been possible.
Absolutely. Well, we do appreciate you coming on. So what do you think, like litigation wise, do you think is going to be the biggest hurdle? Do you think it's going to be governors? Do you think it's going to be legislature?
Yeah. Well, so I guess I'll take that from two angles. One would be mobile voting and binding elections, the kind of work that Votes is doing. And really that's usually limited by enabling legislation has to exist in a given state that allows typically military voters to vote electronically. Not every state has that. So they started in West Virginia because there was a Republican supervisor of elections there, or Secretary of State, who had the legislation he needed, saw the vision. This was 2018, and kind of kicked off the whole thing and said, let's just try this and see if it can do a better job. They had really good turnout. They actually increased turnout because military voters are one of the most, I guess you could say, disenfranchised. If you're overseas during an election, it is often very difficult to get a piece of paper through a mail system. It could take weeks or months. And to get it counted means it has to show up on time. It's really challenging. And so I think he immediately, to his credit, saw the value, kicked it off. And then now a variety of other states where there already is good legislation in effect have been able to take the ball and run with it. So Utah, Arizona, Oregon, Michigan actually is one of them.
I was going to ask. That's where we are. Whatever you need to get this boat moving, let's go.
For sure. And so several states where that legislation already exists. For states where it doesn't already exist, you basically need the legislature to say, we'll give local supervisors of election the authority to do this, at least as a trial basis, and prove out the technology, and then maybe go from there. So, and each of those states has their own process for verifying the tech and making sure it's secure and all that kind of stuff. So that's usually what makes the adoption slower. In Canada, actually, the province of Ontario has recently authorized it for all voters at a municipal level. Awesome. So if you're voting in a city government, they said anybody can vote by phone.
That's amazing.
And so they're going to.
I would guess too that there's probably not a whole lot of voter turnout for something like that. But if you put it on someone's phone, make it very easy for them, then you have bigger turnout, and you actually don't get mayors like, let's say, Karen Bass, for example.
This is exactly the challenge, right? Especially things like primaries, where in a lot of whether it's mayor's races or in U.S. House or in state races, a lot of times the primary is the election, because the districts are so heavily gerrymandered that by the time November rolls around, you really don't have a say in the process, depending on if you're in a red district or blue district. So that's where if you can just increase turnout in the primaries, you're already doing a great job. And that's where people just don't, it doesn't get as much coverage. They don't listen. It's harder to take off work because it's not the quote unquote election day.
Right.
And same thing for city councils, school boards, all these different types of elections, special elections. So just increasing access. We've seen Denver did a city election where they made it an option so that people could vote by phone, and it doubled turnout just in the tests that they ran. So I think that it's pretty clear that the technology is the way to go, and it's about doing it in a way that maintains trust and confidence. That's the hardest part, is giving people like the ease of access of being able to sit at home. The other thing, Drew, the most common feedback people give is that they're like, oh man, I didn't even know all these ballot initiatives and like bond issuances and judges. I didn't know who any of these people were. And normally if they're in a polling booth and they've got a line of people behind them, they feel this pressure to either just, Christmas tree all the way down or skip most of them, which is what most people do. Right. They just don't fill it out. Whereas if they're at home and they can just get on Google and just do some research on their own pace, it lowers the temperature for them, that sense of stress, and they can actually make an informed decision on their own terms, which is really a nice aspect of it.
That's amazing. So let me ask you this. So we constantly see right now this battle of gerrymandering, and I know with the scorecards that you have, right? do you find that like the heavily gerrymandered states have like the worst scorecards, or do you see any correlation there?
You know what I find, which I found has been very kind of exciting, is that when you actually put the policies themselves in front of people, people's ideas are all over the map. People don't really line up with any kind of a left versus right concept. Right. There are plenty of bills that split progressives or split conservatives. Or you think about the whole Gaza situation on the left, or think about the whole Epstein file situation on the right. There are plenty of these things where people don't necessarily line up by party. And actually, if you think about it, the whole two-party system sort of forces us into thinking about the world in a red versus blue dynamic, which doesn't actually exist inside of people's minds. Right. People make their decision based on their own lived experiences, their own values, how they were brought up, their social relationships, and how they've learned about the world, and that's how they decide about policy. And I actually think that that's been the most inspiring part about this project, is that you find that regardless of the district, you actually see quite a bit of divergence. People are just not monolithic in the way that they respond to different bills.
That's interesting. How do you see something like voter ID play into something like this? Do you see a lot of pushback? Because I know has been with pushback. Like votes, they require ID. Yeah. Does anybody ever say, "Well, that's"?
There is no way to do this and keep it trustworthy without photo ID. There just isn't.
Right.
And I know that there are people. This has been a political fight where there are folks on the left who don't like photo ID because they claim that it'll, limit access for certain types of voters and all this. But at the same time, I think you'll find that like there are people on the left who like what we're doing and are like, well, yeah, obviously you can't keep it secure without photo ID. There's no other way. It just becomes it's like impractical to even have that discussion, right? It's like, do you want us to get rid of photo ID? And everybody's like, no, not really. Okay.
Right.
So,
well, it's kind of like, it's an 80-20 issue. So that's why I was wondering, because you have like heavily gerrymandered states, even you have it both ways now, but Chicago, for example. I mean, do you see a lot of, people where they're like, well, this scorecard is way out of whack. This person's not serving their constituents.
Yeah. Actually, we've had some pushback from, this is kind of weird. We're about to do new scorecards. So because the legislative sessions in Florida and several other states, including Michigan, by the way, we do state level
Let's do it.
bills in Michigan. So, so we're just about to publish some more scorecards now with all the legislative session that's just wrapped up. So we'll see how they shake out. But one of the things I found fascinating was that there was, when we produced scorecards on the U.S. House of the Florida delegation last year, there was a Republican out of Miami who had the top score, and then you had like Matt Gaetz out of Pensacola had the bottom score.
Really?
And they were like, yeah, it was really wild the way it shook out. But you also there was a Democrat.
Is Pensacola? I don't know Florida necessarily, but is that more of like a purple area or?
No, it's a pretty red district, but it was the way that I think Gaetz was just really controversial as an individual.
He was, yeah.
And
you like to push the buttons.
Yeah, for sure. And but we also had similarly, like the person who had a score next to him was a very progressive Democrat, and then the person who had like the top score next to this Republican was like a very kind of a centrist Democrat. And so they were like way on the other ends of the spectrum from each other. So I found that was one of the most fascinating findings, was that I think when you take away the political ideology and you just focus on the practicality of here's what the bill says, here's what it says in black and white, we give people the tools, they can read the legislation for themselves, they can form their own opinions. You actually find that people just are not as extreme as we're led to believe.
Right.
There is so much more crossover.
The truth is in the middle. Yeah. I agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the most exciting things I think is that we really went all in on AI once we realized, 'cause at the very beginning, we were reading all the bills, and I would have a Republican and a Democrat work together to write summaries to make sure that they were as nonpartisan and as factually accurate and unbiased as possible. And then really once AI started becoming pretty, on the scene in 2022, 3 or whatever, we started allowing the AI to read and summarize the legislation as a first pass, and then our guys would go and review it, make sure it doesn't hallucinate, say anything crazy, and it allowed us to do a lot more legislation because we were reading. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of pages, and so now we've actually got a chatbot that's on our website where we load hundreds of thousands of pages of legislative text on thousands of different bills that we carry, and people can just go in and ask it detailed questions like, the one big beautiful bill, how does it affect tax cuts, right? Does it affect my bracket specifically, right? Things like this that are kind of deep and buried, and you don't really get that in the media. You depending on which media sources you get some coverage of some things, right, and not. It's entirely twisted based on where you're getting your information. If you're in social media also, you're getting it sort of algorithmically driven. It's very difficult to actually get, what does the text say? Right. And do I think it's a good idea or not? And that's what we're trying to provide to people. And AI has been incredibly powerful to cut through a lot of that noise. We load all the legislative text. People can read, a 1,500-page, one big beautiful bill, but they can jump straight to sections to say, this is how it affects SNAP payments. This is how it affects tax breaks.
I would assume the actual politicians do that too. There's no way they actually read the whole thing.
They can't.
Night before, here's 1,500 pages. Exactly. Vote on it tomorrow morning. Yeah, there's
exactly.
No way.
This is this is another frustrating aspect about Congress is that both parties have been doing this now for the last 20-some years. They've gotten away from regular order, and now everything is kind of baked by the leadership team and just thrown on the members at the 11th hour, and then they do these vote-a-rama sessions on these huge, incredibly consequential pieces of legislation with no debate, no opportunity for public comments, and that's why you find years later, people are like, oh, wow, there's a big hole in the bill that somebody should fill. There's another big hole in the bill, and it's like we're constantly then patching these problems that could have been identified if you just had a system for debate and dialogue and compromise and consensus that we used to have, that we've sabotaged in our own process the system that used to work, and now it's like this scrappy little nonprofit is trying to fix what really should be fixed right. by our legislators, system. And then they cannot get out of their own way. The system has so many structural deficiencies now, and people have lost faith in it, and we got to give people an opportunity to believe again that we now have the tools to do this smartly and provide voters that sense of agency over the process, which all of us feel like we no longer have.
That's amazing. So you brought up, and I know your background's in AI, and I hear people talk about this constantly with hallucinations. Where the AI just makes a crazy assumption based on information. What AI do you think is the worst culprit of hallucinations?
I find that, I don't know if in terms of the worst, there are benchmarks that people in the software development industry use, but basically our strategy has been try to stay with the frontier models for the highest quality results and also pit them against each other. So we're using quite a bit from Anthropic, quite a bit from OpenAI. We use from Gemini. So those are provided by different companies, and we'll oftentimes put them head to head. So if let's say the chatbot that we've got on our website is pulling from a vector database with all these legislative texts in it, it has to cite its sources. So it has to say which document did I find it from, which section. So you can actually, as an individual, go back and validate yourself if you want to. That's one thing.
That's important.
The other thing is, if we're using OpenAI, we try to stay closest to the most current models so that their hallucination rates do get smaller and smaller with their more current releases. And then we'll have Anthropic go and evaluate the results. So once a week, we generate a report that says, did it cite its sources? Did it give the right answers? And so we actually have some ground truth that we're measuring against, so we can throw alerts to our team if it looks like it's starting to hallucinate or give bad answers, and we can make changes. So that's kind of how everybody in the industry is trying to figure out how to do this well. But that's kind of what we found to be working for us so far. And then people just give us feedback directly. They'll say, hey, I like this answer. I didn't like this answer. But and we try to continuously make updates so that we're constantly staying close to the cutting edge.
Do you think that the battle for all these data centers is worth it? You think that building these things up, a lot of them fast, or do you think that'll help the AI growth in this country? Because I know right now that computing costs of everything's so expensive, and does that cost bleed into like the blockchain technology?
Yeah, it is becoming a political problem now in some states, right? Because there's so much, I'm an AI optimist, right? I see how we're using it for public good. I see how we're helping voters have more access and accountability in a system where they don't feel that. So, but I will often be approached by folks who are just terrified of it or worried about the costs of energy or of water for all these data centers. There's an interesting guy named Ethan Mollick who teaches at NYU, and he's kind of an AI futurist, if you will. But he's a professor there, and he does some interesting studies. And one of the ones that I found fascinating was about water use. And it talked about how much water do data centers use. And AI, mind you, is actually only one slice of data centers. Most of what's filling up data centers is all the TikTok videos that people put on there. It's
I believe that, yeah.
Everybody, it's like my wife takes 1,000 photos of the cats. Like, that's filling up the data centers.
Me too. Hey, no, don't worry about that. There are babies.
Totally. Totally. So, but AI is a piece of that. But if you actually look at water usage, it's like AI, then data centers, then things like industrial equipment like smelters, aluminum manufacturing, like people building silicon wafers and copper, right? Okay, mining, right? A bunch of those fracking actually uses a lot of water. So that's like this. And then you know what the top one was? It was like this, like way off the chart. Golf courses.
I believe that, yeah. I believe that.
So it's almost like AI is the thing of the moment. And so people, like, we saw this during COVID. We've seen this in all these different kind of social media engineered anxiety moments where some new thing comes onto the scene. People complained about blockchain for this reason, 5 years ago,
right,
or 10 years ago, crypto miners, running up the price of electricity. Now it's AI. It's not that AI is not going to need, it is hungry for power and electricity, of course. But that produces an immense amount of jobs that are blue collar jobs for electricians and welders and plumbers and construction workers who are building all these. This is a huge this is an industrial revolution, really.
It is,
and there's all of that makes that possible is going to be incredibly transformative in our economy. And when we talk about people are worried about their job loss and all this kind of stuff, there's a lot of people who are at work now who lost their jobs in manufacturing that was like shipped overseas that are now building data centers. Those same skills are transferable. Yeah. So I actually am very optimistic about this as a tremendous industrial opportunity. But yeah, you're going to see things like states will say, okay, if these data centers need to just pay more money for electricity, or they need to bring their own electricity to the table where they need to come, you're going to build a data center. You need to also have generators on site so that you're not constantly pulling so much from the grid that we can't even keep the lights on or we're having blackouts.
Right.
I think that'll be a natural and
California is huge, I would imagine. California is huge. They always have blackouts,
Yeah. So you're going to see that kind of thing because it just puts a lot of strain on the grid. And so Google actually bought a power company themselves. They went and bought a power company so that they can actually provide generation on their own site. Microsoft did a deal to restart 3 Mile Island, a nuclear plant.
Yeah, that's wild. I saw a documentary on that from like the 80s. It's like, what?
Yeah.
That would have had to have been horrifying, especially back then with like, oh my God, what do we do? I mean, I think the same thing today. Yeah. God, it's melting down. What the fuck do we do?
Yeah. Kind of crazy. Like so you're seeing these guys now, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, they're basically buying up whole power plants, restarting nuclear plants, building whole wind farms or solar farms on site to support these data centers because they recognize that the grid operators are not going to be able to give them enough power without creating potentially rolling blackouts where whole cities are shutting down, and that's just like politically untenable. Yeah. So they're going to have to solve the problem themselves.
We see it a lot here in Michigan too, where there's a lot of farmland now that they're buying, renting from the farmer or whatever, and they're putting up all these solar panels and stuff like that. So like you got different entities that are renting these farm towns and putting all these solar things up and whatnot. But what do you think like the biggest hurdle is, for AI? Do you think that that what the president's doing right now with trying to, keep America number one? Because I mean, obviously if China eats our lunch at this with like their DeepSeek and stuff like that, that's not good.
Yeah. The Chinese have put some excellent models into the field, especially in open source. So I think that's been really interesting. If you look at a lot of the American models are closed commercial products, OpenAI, Gemini. Actually, to Google's credit, they actually just open sourced Gemma 4. Right. And to Meta's credit, they open sourced Llama 3.2, I think is where they are now, or 3.3.
Isn't that what Elon wanted with ChatGPT? Wasn't that what the whole lawsuit was about?
Yeah. That was the argument, was that it was meant to be a nonprofit and they were meant to be, essentially a public resource. And then that was the big fight over that, right? So I think that the Chinese have been good at adopting open source, which is open source was theoretically an American concept from back in the 70s and 80s of open source software.
Right.
So I think they should get. I happen to like open source. I mean, it's like, why not? You've got this incredible technology. It's free. You can run it yourself. But then it comes down to, do you have the compute power to run it? Obviously, that's the whole thing. But yes, we want the United States to be the center of innovation for this technology. And I do think that the administration deserves some credit for that. And it's interesting to see that, again, this comes back to the political dynamics. There's a split inside the Republican Party, and there's a split inside the Democratic Party on AI.
Yep.
So not all issues actually line up left and right. In fact, most issues don't line up left and right.
Agree.
We just tend to focus on the ones that like drive anger and can pit people against each other, and
well, because that's the one that gets people riled up to go vote.
Yeah,
they feel
exactly.
People.
Well, you're right. I mean,
it's like they say, like politics, people might not remember a place, a name, or anything, but they will always remember how it made them feel. I think that was Maya Angelou.
I think that's a very good point. And I think if you ever read the book Politics Industry, I recommend that for your audience. Understanding the mechanics of how politics work, and politics is motivated by enragement for engagement. It is perfectly aligned to the same basic fundamentals of the media ecosystem that attaches to it. And so the media ecosystem promotes the same political apparatus that drives a wedge between people and pits them against one another in order to keep their eyeballs on the screen or on their phone, or keep them donating to a party. It is the exact same enragement model that works in politics that also works in media. And I think that's one of the things we've got to figure out how to break out of. And I'm just very excited about this technology and how it can do that.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a great thing for the future, especially with like military, because I saw your TED talk about it, and you had said, you used to mail out these things, and the guy that you voted for in the primary had dropped out before your vote got there. Like,
exactly.
That's not fair, especially the guys that are the ones out there securing our freedoms.
There was just a Supreme Court case, basically, where the courts said that the states are not obligated to count military ballots.
That's crazy.
I just found, what a gut punch. I mean, it actually hurts to even say it out loud.
I agree. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, they basically, it's like, if they don't arrive in a certain amount of time, you can just discard them. And it's like, well, how is that? We need to solve that problem. I happen to think this technology can be a way to solve that problem. Obviously, people want the votes to be counted on, everybody's like, oh, we should have the results on election night, and everybody should know so that we get maximum trust in the process, right? I understand all that. But as a military voter who's been through this personally, it was an affront to me, this notion that because it's not our fault that it takes weeks or whatever for the post office to deliver something from Djibouti,
right,
wherever.
So the DHL or whatever.
Exactly. So I actually did one time FedEx my ballot in because I was worried about how long it would take, and I wanted it to be counted. I paid like $50 to send my ballot in. So yeah, I don't think it's the military voters should be punished, or even Americans overseas in general. There are a lot of Americans who live overseas, right? Yeah. And as a result, you see the lowest turnout amongst military voters and Americans overseas because of that.
What do you think do you think that this could really help, even because talking about voter turnout, you see a lot of that even in the midterms, major elections, general elections, huge turnout, but then you get like the midterms and it's like even less people show up. Do you think something like this could help push that turnout?
Yeah,
give people more stake in the game, some skin in the game.
Absolutely. Give people more skin in the game. For one, let's look at the structural reasons why turnout drops. We've got a situation where, like in Florida in the last election, 90+% of the legislative districts, that's both the U.S. House as well as State House and State Senate, are so heavily gerrymandered that by the time November rolls around, it's already baked. In the state legislature, it was something like 70% of the seats went unchallenged, where you had a Democrat or Republican incumbent, and nobody bothered to run against them.
Right.
I mean, how is that a situation? Like that
right.
cannot be the standard, right, for our system. And it's because the Republicans and Democrats don't agree on much. They hate each other all the time. But the one thing they do agree on is colluding to basically rig our election system so they don't have to compete with each other in almost all districts. They basically only compete over 5 to 10% of districts, and the other 90% are just safe seats that they don't want to bother to compete with. And I will point this out that to my Democratic friends who think that gerrymandering is a Republican thing, I'll point out that there are more registered Republicans in California than there are in Florida. But the registered Republicans in California have 8 seats in the U.S. House, and the registered Republicans in Florida have 20 seats in the U.S. House, and they're both gerrymandering their districts to make that worse. So the registered Republicans will only have 4 seats in the U.S. House, and the registered Republicans in Florida will have 24 seats in the U.S. House. But it's the same number of people. How is that? How is it possible that they're like? It's because of gerrymandering. If politicians are allowed to carve out the voters that they don't want to hear from, then why should voters turn up? Why should they be asked year after year to take it seriously when they know that their votes are not being considered because they are not the one that the politicians want to hear from?
Right. And they should be the ones that they want to hear from. they should be.
Of course.
You got to listen to your constituents. I feel like there is that. Like people are shouting one thing and then they just do something else. And I saw that with the Republican Party forever. And I see that with Michigan Republicans. I'm a Republican. But they just don't fight. Or they just lay down. And it's like the old school Republicans, like the Mitt Romneys and the Paul Ryans that lost. And I bet you if you had a scorecard for them, they didn't have good ones against, their constituents that put them there.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're hoping to prove, not with any particular person, but we want to show that we're judging people based on democracy. We're not judging them based on any particular policies. There are plenty of other organizations that put out scorecards. The NRA does this. Chamber of Commerce does this. We're not interested in the policies themselves. We're judging people based on their basic principle that, are you representing your district? And can we hold you accountable to representing your district with concrete facts that says your district wanted X, but you did Y? And over the course of hundreds of bills over somebody's political career, you will see a trend line. Maybe one time or a couple times they have to disagree because they look, I know that this is what my district wanted, but I know what's best and I'm going to make this decision. Fine. We're fine with that. Their job is to represent. It's
controversial, but it turns out, right?
Yes.
They execute.
Right. Exactly. They were given that trust and confidence, and they'll be held accountable for it. But if you look at somebody's trend line over the course of all these bills, and they're consistently not scoring well, that should be an indication that somebody else should come and challenge that person and say, well, I mean, I could do better than 50%.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You should be doing better than 50%. That's the whole idea, is to represent your people. I had heard too that way back in the day when, before that they used to just, used to elect, the House of Representatives, Congress, and all this, and they were the ones that would vote for president. Can you imagine that before they gave that power to the states, where it was like general elections, and there was probably a huge dissonance there between the people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It used to be that the state legislature chose our U.S. senators. And so South Carolina actually was one of the most aristocratic states. So they had the least amount of voter turnout. This was interesting. The South Carolina legislature, prior to the Civil War, actually used a lot of the same techniques that ultimately became Jim Crow, but they used them against white voters. So the idea was, for one, you could not vote unless you had a significant amount of money. I mean, you had to have a lot of land, and so you're talking about the planter class, right? Would actually have a say in the process. So there was that, and then they would do all sorts of tests, like you had to have literacy tests or grading your knowledge of the Constitution or whatever. All the things that ended up being the same techniques in Jim Crow. You also had to be a man, but there was no concept of universal suffrage at the time.
Right.
And so turnout or representation in the antebellum in South Carolina was the smallest of all the states. So and I'm talking about amongst white men, it was something like 30%. Whereas if you were in Massachusetts, it was something like 80%. So you could see the fruits of sort of anti-democratic tools have been a long-standing tradition in our system of government. And I happen to believe that the basic conflict of interest that we have in the American system that results in so many of the problems that we see today is that we allow politicians to choose the manner of elections in which they themselves are going to compete. Right. It'd be like if you let Tom Brady officiate his own football game, and it'd be like, sure, deflating the ball is fine. Why not? I mean,
right. Well, it's kind of like the Carrie Lake one when she ran for governor a couple of years ago. They had that Katie Hobbs, who became the governor of Arizona. She was the Secretary of State overseeing her election, and everybody's like, "Oh, there's nothing there."
I mean, that is a fundamental conflict of interest. One thing that other countries have done to deal with this problem, because everybody's dealt with it, is they've gone towards independent election commissions. And I think some states have already started to try to do that for the purpose of dealing with gerrymandering. But we really need to think about it overall. We should not allow the Democrats and the Republicans to determine how elections get carried out, because this is why you see it's so difficult for third parties to get onto the ballot, for independents to run for office. They have entirely different rules for independents and third parties, as you see for Democrats and Republicans. It's much harder for them to raise money legally because of the way the apparatus of fundraising is controlled. And so then things like it's very difficult to pass ranked choice voting or open primaries. We're seeing right now in the District of Columbia that Democrats are blocking open primaries, despite the fact that Proposition 83 passed with 71% of the voters. You're talking about a very blue city. You're talking about predominantly Democratic voters or progressives, even if they're independents or whatever. 71% said they wanted ranked choice voting and open primaries. And an all Democrat run district city council is actively blocking that by not being willing to fund any elections that have open primaries in them. And to me, that is just one of the examples of how the parties will try to prevent any kind of threat to their own primacy and control. And we need something to the effect of independent election commissions to have the kinds of reforms that we're going to need to have in order to really bring back a sense of, debate and dialogue and compromise and consensus, which we were all raised to believe is the fundamental building blocks that make America work.
Amen. That's exactly what Charlie used to say. Charlie Kirk, he said, when you stop having that dialogue, that's when people get violent. And it's kind of true. And it's sad, but I can't thank you enough for coming on today. I appreciate you so much. It's been super interesting, and thank you so much for coming on. We'll put I really appreciate in the bios and everything, so everybody can go check out your site and everything.
Yeah, check out digitaldemocracyproject.org. We're an all volunteer community effort. We believe all Americans are going to need to pick up the baton and carry it forward if we want a better, more accountable, more transparent system of government that our children and our grandchildren can be proud of. And I think that means, volunteers, that means donations, that means helping spread the word. So Drew, really appreciate you giving us the chance to talk to your audience today.
Well,
it means a lot.
Very interesting. I'm sure they thought the same, and I can't thank you enough. We'll have to have you on again sometime.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on. Have a great one. All right. So that was fun. Very entertaining. Great guest. I picked his mind on AI and the blockchain, which I think is a really cool idea to get the votes out there. I think it's super important for the military because I think the military needs to have their say in the system. They're the ones that are risking their lives, and these people should be out there. It's crazy, but this one here, I wanted to show this one because this is some crazy shit. Okay, so you had Joe Biden come out and say that she thought that her husband was having a stroke and she's never seen him like that. This woman continues to lie about her husband just for votes, attention. It's like sick.
Saw it unfold. I wasn't horrified. I was frightened because I had never, ever seen Joe like that.
With the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
She says, I thought he was having a heart attack. So that's why afterwards, instead of getting him to the hospital, they took him to like the Waffle House to do more campaigning, really. But this is CNN's evolution of Biden's cognitive disability. And this is so funny because it just shows you how much they're frauds or they lie about it.
The November choice is between two.
Look at this. Hang on here. Let's get full screen here.
Old men. We know that. But tonight I want to talk about the Joe Biden that Republicans want you to see and the pipeline of videos that aren't telling the full truth. Now, those videos are probably right now clogging the public consciousness as Americans start to think about their votes. The RNC wants to weaponize questions around Biden's age. Isn't it possible that things have changed? He, like every other human being, is aging. And that process of aging, it seems, is having an impact on his ability to do the job. The autopsy that the Democrats didn't delve into that, but it should. Yeah. What kind of political system covers that up and makes it okay to lie to people about what everybody knows is true? The November choice is between...
Everybody knew. It was so obvious that Joe was having cognitive problems, but they were just covering it up. So I wanted to show this one too, because this one here is a video of votes being flipped in real time during 2020. And I'm glad that we're starting to find these and they're getting exposed for exactly what happened that day in 2020. But check this one out.
Joe Biden right now, 560,000 votes, only 54%. So that's a problem. It's a warning sign in the Biden campaign. Not insurmountable, because you come up here, can you make it up? This is
votes
number 2.
Flipped in real
Broward
time.
County. Miami-Dade's number 1.
Second largest
this is
county.
This is the second largest county. You're at 66 with 562,000 votes. You go back and look at it. So you're running ahead of Hillary Clinton if you're Joe Biden in the count. Turnout is up this time. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's enough, but if you're Joe Biden in the count, turnout is up this time. So that doesn't necessarily...
Turnout is up this time. What a joke.
To Palm Beach County.
The third largest.
Get it to come up. 1, 2, and 3 are right there. 1, 2, and 3 are right there, 58 to 41. If you look at it there, 391,000 votes. Joe Biden, again, exceeding her total, and right now at the moment exceeding her percentage.
We're missing various parts of the equation to know definitively where things are going, and that... Whoa. All right, hold on a second. No. Look. Joe Biden just took the lead in Wisconsin. Right. We're getting new information.
Again, they flipped votes.
We'll go through it.
It's fucking crazy that the Democrats lied and covered up all of that. And it's just disgusting. But I wanted to finish with this one here because, and I might have to do a show midweek, because this one here is AOC speaking to a bunch of Muslims in a hijab, and watch how the males don't even fucking pay attention to her, that she's even talking.
Selflessness and solidarity. And most importantly, we renew our commitment to one another. Because when we work together with devotion to our neighbors, our community, and to this country, we can bring light into the darkness. So thank you once again for having me here today. Eid Mubarak, and our selfless.
So, like, they're not even paying attention to her. They're just, like, blurting shit out over her. Like, they had no respect for her as a woman, but yet she sticks up for those fucking people. But I digress. You have the E. Jean Carroll case, where this woman changed the laws to bring a case against the president of the United States, Donald Trump. And now we're finding out that she's under investigation now because of the whole fraud. It was all a fraud. But look at this.
Justice Department,
look at this woman.
CNN is learning, has launched a new criminal investigation into one of Trump's enemies, E. Jean Carroll. Now, E. Jean Carroll was the former magazine columnist who accused President Donald Trump of sexual assault. Ended up being that he was liable for sexual abuse. The source is telling CNN that the investigation now is focused on whether Carroll committed perjury during her 2 civil lawsuits against the president. Paula Reed is breaking the story, and she's out front. And Paula, what else are you learning about this? I mean, there was obviously a verdict here.
That's right. And here, Aaron, this is the latest move by the Justice Department to take action against one of President Trump's long-standing foes. Our sources
because
tell
what
us
she
this
did was illegal and criminal.
On a 2022 deposition that Carroll gave, where she said that she had not received any outside funding. Now, her lawyers later told the judge that she had, in fact, received funding for legal fees and expenses from billionaire Reid Hoffman. The judge overseeing this case ultimately said there were no issues with her credibility and blocked Trump lawyers from asking about this at trial. Now, Carroll currently has multiple legal battles with Trump currently pending, including one before the Supreme Court. And notably, Aaron, the Supreme Court has deferred 12 times on a decision whether they want to take up that case. Now, over at the Justice Department, acting Attorney General.
So I guess, like, my main point is that CNN is still against Trump's enemies. She's a fucking nut job who lied about it. She doesn't remember, and the whole case was bullshit. They don't remember. She can't remember the year. She can't remember where. She can't remember anything. And she has admitted on camera, amongst Democrats, that it was all a hoax. It was a fraud. So this woman should be thrown in jail for accusing somebody of rape. But I digress. I was going to show that one. Looks like I am not. But it's crazy. I wanted to show this last one here. This one here is how a woman who is a teacher cuts down a Trump flag, and these people act morally superior. But it turns out that this woman's a teacher, and I think we got to expose these people for the nut jobs that they are, because they think they're better than everybody.
God bless America. This is my road. I pay for it. Do this in your own front yard.
I live in Bethesda.
You have a right to display whatever you want in your front yard, but not in a road that everyone pays for, not in the public right of way.
Hey, Karen, what's your name?
Like, what type of person thinks that that's okay? She's a fucking nut job. These anti-Catholic, anti-Christian scumbags.
It did. It was 12 hours.
Good morning. Somebody got.
So what's your name?
My name is First Amendment.
It's not your First Amendment right to destroy my First Amendment right.
You can't put it in the public right of way.
Yeah, it's legal. You didn't say that when Black Lives Matter was out here marching in the streets, did you?
No.
I didn't put any banners up.
I'm allowed to, lady. Why do you think we're doing it?
Lady.
Why do you think the cops are going to arrest you, not me?
A pair of scissors she's brandishing.
Do you want to give us the $25 for the flag?
This is how it's recommended to carry scissors safely. I'm not pointing you.
Do you want to give us $25 for the flag, or what's up? or call the cops.
It doesn't belong in the public.
You're going to get arrested. I really, you don't understand. This is completely legal, you dumbass. That's why we've been out here for weeks.
It's not legal.
It's 100% legal.
Call the cops.
We don't give a
Call
shit
the
about
Call
your
911
feelings.
right
We
now.
don't care
Call
about
the
your
cops on
feelings.
yourself cutting down the flag.
Yeah, call 911. Do you want to pay for the flag and we'll let you off easy, or you want to do it the hard way and go to jail?
You call 911.
Oh, we will. Don't you worry.
What else do you need to know? What's the name of your organization?
My name is Sean Porter. It's on the sign.
Well, I hope that you use your own.
Do you want to make
private-
restitution now, or do you want to be insane and go to
I
jail?
hope that you use your own private property.
She sounds
to express
drunk.
your First Amendment.
No, I paid for
Shut
this
the fuck
because
up,
it's
bitch.
public property.
You're not renting from the public.
I'm allowed to be out here, and so
If
are
I
you.
run a basketball league.
You
at
can
a
put it up
school,
there as long as it's not
if I wanna
commercial.
use a basketball league at a school, I need to pay rent to that school because we all own
Karen
it.
has taken the law into her own hands.
Ron, she's crazy. But
Yeah,
look, do you want to
she
pay
is
restitution, or you want me to call cops? I'm just being honest.
Call them.
Oh, we're going
Call
to.
them right now.
Hey, Ron.
They think that they're better.
Hey!
They think that
Sit
they're
down.
morally superior.
Call
better than everybody
911.
else. These people are nuts.
911.
And they
I
need to
have
be
to go to
cast.
work now.
No,
outcast
you're
in
going.
society.
You're going to go to court. Is what you're doing.
Don't waste the public money. Go to court.
Get her license.
Oh, you're going to
plate.
pay restitution now, you broke Subaru driver?
No. Gotta go teach your children.
I homeschooled, lady. My kid is
Oh,
grown.
that's how it's
Report this bitch to the school.
Yeah,
Seriously.
freedom.
All right, now you.
She represents the school district too.
Me. So I'm going to call the cops.
You should.
I don't need to be
Get her
phony.
out of the cops. You should be able to hit
doing
somebody in
nothing
this
wrong,
situation.
So good morning.
You
That's some
malicious
sense into it.
destruction of property
I
under the
don't
Maryland
think that.
Criminal Code.
Smith, look at you two.
There's no lawful purpose. We're getting your ID for the police department, and we documented your criminal act for the state's attorney's office.
Great.
That's a
great.
lawful purpose.
But what you're doing is harassing me.
No, we're going to prosecute.
Now it's harassment. You see how this happens with the Democrats? Oh, I'm just taking the law into my own hands. But now, oh, you're harassing me. Honey, your feelings do not I don't give a fuck about your feelings. Your feelings do not take priority over my rights.
You for malicious destruction of property.
6 feet tall man picking on Heather. We need to get both of you.
Call 911.
You can tell that she's not all there. That's probably why she's teaching kids.
Are you a school nurse?
Me and my large 6 feet tall friends me for 20 minutes so I can't get to school.
These people are nuts. And like, I hope that they reported this woman to the school district. Like, what gives these people the right to do this? She thinks that she's cutting down this sign because Donald Trump is such a bad man. Well, here's the other side of that story. Okay? Is this one right here. And this is a woman stating that Donald Trump saved her life. Listen to this one here. It's very touching.
Trump saved my life, literally. My dad and my mom passed at the same time. I was in a bad place. I was going towards the Brooklyn Bridge. Don't ask me why, but I was. Donald Trump was standing on 97th Street in Broadway. He was at a friend's birthday party. And when he saw me coming past, I was hysterical in tears. And he gently grabbed my arm. He was like, whoa, wait a minute, are you okay? And he said, well, I don't know what you're going to do right now, but whatever it is, forget about it. Take it out of your head. Your mom and dad wouldn't want that. And he talked to me till I forgot all about what I was going to do. So he said, let me pray for you. So when I went to get my keys out of my pocket, and I opened my hand, he had placed a folded up, real small, folded up $100 bill in my hand. I framed it, literally, and this is a true story. He saved my life. Yeah, he did. So anybody that has anything bad to say about Trump, that it, because he's a good man.
And that's the difference between normal people and fucking nutjob liberals who just think that they're morally superior and that Trump is such a bad guy. They're nuts. Correct them. Don't let them say that stupid shit because they've been exposed. And a lot of them are boomers. And the problem with that is that these people think that they know more than you when they're just getting their information from CNN, NBC, ABC News, and it's not real. they're not real news channels. They lie. They've been caught lying. They've spent more money paying off the president for their mishaps than any other organization. So I digress. That is all the time we had for you guys this Saturday. We'll be back next Saturday with Rick Adante, one of the whistleblowers that was featured on Charlie Kirk's show. God bless every single one of you. Thank you for watching. God bless the USA. And get out there and talk shit to a liberal today. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great one.